This is Bill Ryan from Project Avalon, and it's the 10th of March 2011, and this is a Project Avalon interview with a little bit of a difference, and it's certainly different for me. It's fascinating for me, and here I am with Lucia René, who has recently written a book that's had quite an impact, and the title of this book is Unplugging the Patriarchy, and that's also going to be the title of this video. And Lucia is here with me. Hello, Lucia.
Hello.
Can I shake your hand? Beautiful. It's a delight to meet you. I met you for the first time yesterday. You come very highly recommended. And the topic which you have your attention on and which you're presenting in the book, as I understand it, is about the role of men and the role of women in the changing times which we are absolutely right at the tipping point of right now. And the interpretation which you have about that could really help a lot of people understand what's happening with a historical perspective and also a view into the future. Is that anywhere close to a little kind of micro summary of your work?
Oh, it's very close. Absolutely. Yeah, and I think that's exactly the place to begin, is understanding historically, where we find ourselves at this moment. Because we are at not only the end of the patriarchal era, right, but we're at the end of a cycle of time. So the Hindus, they call it the Kali Yuga, the age of greatest darkness. Kali is the goddess of destruction, and so we live in a time when everything is ending. Not the earth is ending, as many people predict. That's ridiculous. But time is ending. The cycle is ending, right? Something entirely new is about to be given birth, or is in the process, you could almost say, of being in the birth canal. So my message to people that I try to convey is really one of pulling back out of the personal self, because the personal self takes life very personally. That's its job, right? We've been conditioned to think of ourselves as this personal self with likes and dislikes. But if we just take a moment and we pull back into a more universal perspective and we look at the earth, as the astronauts reported looking at her in all of her beauty and in that silence and that lack of gravity, that moment, right? And we say, where is she? Where is she in her evolution? She's merely at the end of a cycle of time. And we're about to give birth to something new. So 6,000 years we had a matrilinear era. Now we're in a patriarchal era, and patriarchy simply means male-dominated society. That's all. No judgment, no particular emphasis on masculine or feminine, except that the masculine has been in power for some time, and that the planet is going through, or I suppose it would be more accurate to say humanity is going through a period of time where it is learning lessons about power. That's all.
It sure is.
Yeah, and that's ending. And now we're moving into an era where we will be learning lessons about the heart. Yeah.
Okay. So to compress that all into another micro summary, if I dare, it's pointing out the fact that the world as we have inherited it, as we come in here in these bodies, this generation, this incarnation, and here we are. And it's a world that's been created by men for men, and that structure has been in place for really quite a long time. And that's way out of balance. It results in a lot of aggression, a lot of violence, a lot of exploitation, a lot of things happening in the world for as long as history can record that shouldn't have been happening. And somewhere in there's the opportunity for humanity as a whole to learn a whole load of stuff. And do you feel that we have learnt whatever that whole load of stuff is? Is this part of the prerequisites for a change?
Yes, I agree with you entirely, except I put a slightly different slant on it, and I don't really judge the violence or the constructs of the patriarchy. I think all of that has been necessary. I do think it's gotten a wee bit out of hand.
That sounds like the understatement of millennium.
But you know, if you are learning about power, you know, I'm a mystic, so mysticism is the study of power. It's the art of learning how to wield power, and there are many different aspects to learning about it.
And power doesn't have to be a dirty word, right?
No, it's not at all. It simply means energy or chi, life force. We only have a negative connotation or a spin around the word power in the patriarchy because we look around ourselves and see abuse of power at the present time, right? But power, you know, you're learning about how to gain power, how to avoid the loss of power, how to reclaim power from other lives, how to store power. But ultimately, the mystic gets to the point where they must learn about abuse of power. Because unless, you know, the child has walked up to the stove and put its hand on the stove and realized that's not something that's smart to do, right? Then you really can't come into a place where, as a person, you are able to wield power in a balanced way. And ultimately to where you are able to transfer power, to actually transmute someone's consciousness through power. Because power is not of us, it simply comes through us. Power really comes from the divine, from the depths of silence. And so it can move through and be wielded. It's wielded through the lower chakras, but with the balance of the heart. And that's what we're lacking now, you see. So if we are now moving into an era which is heart-based, which is unconditional love, the heart is really about balance, masculine, feminine balance, balance in all areas of life, being in the still point, yes? So then we as society have hopefully grown into a point where we are ready to wield power with balance. And yes, I think that's coming. I think humanity has learned its lesson.
Okay, now, some of the people watching this will be followers of my own work and will be unfamiliar with yours. And so there's a bridge here that I'd like to kind of construct with your assistance, because my work over the last 5 years with Project Avalon and Project Camelot, it's been about pulling back the black curtain of secrecy and control and lies that we've been told and hidden agendas from those people in the military and in government and in the intelligence services, almost all of whom are men, of course, because they have agendas, they have plans, they have ideas for whatever reasons about how they would like the world to be. And there is a huge majority of the human race who, if they were to know about these things, say, wait a minute, we don't give this our agreement at all. Why are you doing this to us? And so, of course, all of that is about power. And the bridge that I'd like to build is because a lot of people watching this and who have the opportunity to be introduced to your work are people who have been following what could loosely be called conspiracy theories, the ways in which power has been abused in the world for a very long time, but a lot of people are focused on what's happening right now. And even the man in the street will know that there's something fishy about Kennedy's assassination or about 9/11, and it's like, wait a minute, they don't know the full story at all, but they know enough to think, well, you know, maybe there's a little bit of fire behind the smoke, but we're too busy to understand all the details. And what we're trying to do in the work that I have with my own colleagues is to kind of present more clarifying information to deconfuse people with the objective of giving people their power back. Because you can't have power if you're in ignorance. Certainly not. And so can you then help me build the other side of the bridge across to that place where some people watching this will be starting from?
Well, yes, I think the key is duality. You know, we can take it down to a very simple level. The patriarchy, and indeed the era that we've just come through, or rather the cycle that we've just come through, is about duality, so polar opposites, yes? And classically in spiritual literature we call this attraction and aversion. So we are attracted to be in happy states of mind, and we avoid being in unhappy states of mind. Yes, we have masculine, feminine, good and evil, right? We have power and abuse of power. So the world is filled with polarities. We perceive the world through the polarities that we hold within our own egoic structure, within our own personality.
And we expect them to be everywhere because we're kind of conditioned.
Yes.
This is like part of our filter, isn't it? We're kind of told to expect this kind of reality ever since we're kids.
Exactly.
Yes.
It starts, when you're extremely young, this conditioning of functioning in a world of duality. So we don't see the world as it really is. If we entered into a very high meditation, and we're looking at this flower, then the flower is just radiant light, really. You enter into a field where you can see the essence of flower, right? But we don't see that because we've been told this is what a flower is, this is what it looks like, yeah. And we buy into that as children.
So what you're trying to do is to break the hypnotic trance, as it were.
Yes, I'm saying there's some place, and I'm not saying anything new, but there's some place in the center, in balance between every polarity, right? That then when you arrive there, you're viewing life more accurately. So all I'm saying is that yes, it's fine to educate ourselves about conspiracy theory and what is happening and to pull back the Wizard of Oz curtain. That's what I do in my book, is I go into a lot of research about what's going on, and I take the reader, through my own journey of discovery. So it really is all laid out, the overview, the kind of, popping the hood on the patriarchy and looking at the way the engine works from a mystical and psychic point of view.
That's a great metaphor. You said popping the hood on the that's beautiful. I love it.
Popping the hood on the patriarchy.
Popping the hood on the patriarchy.
Yeah.
That could be another book title, didn't it?
But then, once you take the spin off, right? Most people have the spin of this is bad. Power and abuse of power is bad. It's not bad. That's just an opinion that is born out of a field of duality. Yes?
Yes.
Yes. So it's very much about perception. And if all of my polarities, if I have managed to bring them all to rest here, then I can look at the patriarchy without judgment of any kind, without spin of any kind, and I can see what we were talking about earlier. We're simply at the end of a cycle. It's time for this to go away. We've completed our learning in this area, yeah?
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, here come a whole bunch of questions, but the first one, I guess, is how did it get to be this way? How is it that of the two choices available, men basically started to run the planet and apparently abuse the power that they did have? And I mean, for me, it certainly feels like abuse, and it feels like it's way out of balance, and it feels like it was time to stop a long time ago. And I understand you have a slightly kind of, dare I say it, more Zen-like perspective on this, but how did it all start? Where did it go wrong?
Well, you have to take a deep breath here. Because we need to go back beyond the patriarchy to the matrilinear era of some 6,000 years ago, and that was a female, I don't know if I want to say dominated, but females led in that era. And perhaps it too got out of balance, right? When we had our learnings around that. Really, you need to go back. I relate it to the chakras. Can we do that? The energy centers. Yeah. So at the beginning on the planet Earth, we were really at a root chakra type of stage, which was about learning about survival, right? Base instincts. And then we moved up in the matrilinear era to learning about birth and creativity. That's the energy that chakra represents, right? So we learned about fire, and we learned about producing children, right? And building community and all sorts of things, hunting and gathering. But now we've moved up into this era, which is the navel chakra, so we're learning lessons about power, because the navel chakra is pure power, right? And we're rising into this new era, what some people call the fourth dimension, or the new paradigm in consciousness, which is the fourth chakra, and that's about balance, unconditional love, and so on.
And that's basically the construct on which you say, this is why the heart is next.
Yes.
Because it follows.
Exactly. I'm just looking at it from the vantage point of the Earth and her evolution. Really what's happening is simply that her vibration is increasing. So each of us on the planet, you know, when we enter onto a spiritual path, we're literally drawing the Kundalini energy, the raw power, up through the chakras. In a given meditation, it rises, and then in a lifetime we stabilize it at a particular point. So you may stabilize it at the heart in one incarnation, and then you come back and you've stabilized it perhaps at the third eye. You've opened up your third eye, so now you can be psychic. Maybe in another lifetime you fully awaken, so the energy moves up through the crown chakra. But the Earth herself is going through an ascension, and in her ascension process, she's moving from the navel chakra to the heart chakra. It's a huge shift, right, in the energy of the planet.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're presenting this as an inevitable journey. In a way, yeah, that this had to happen, and it's a natural, and in itself it's all a huge natural cycle.
Oh, yeah.
And there's nothing wrong about it. It's just a growth process for all of our current civilization.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think, you know, to distinguish the point that it really is the journey of Mother Earth that we're looking at. We just happen to be living on her. And we can either fight against that or we can benefit from it, yes? We can use that acceleration in the vibration of the Earth to also accelerate our own evolution, especially now. We're at a very key time in this process when people can make extraordinary evolutionary jumps.
Okay, so let's go back to what you were saying, that before the patriarchy, if I understood you right, you said that there was a matriarchy.
Yes.
And maybe that wasn't all in balance, but there was a change way back sometime in our history. Is that right? I mean, is this something you can nail down to civilizations that are known in history?
Yes, I think Crete was the last known matrilinear society. And they're wonderful. They're mostly women art historians who have written books like Merlin Stone, When God Was a Woman, and Anne Baring, The Myth of the Goddess. When they go back, because we didn't have writing. Writing is an advent of, you know, more recent times, the whole left brain oriented culture. And so we were more in a right brain or a balanced situation then. But you can go back and look at the art and see the great Mother Goddess and the fact that the feminine, you know, the divine feminine was not only accepted but worshipped and revered in those societies.
So what changed?
So what changed, in my estimation, and this is a seeing that we bring forward in Unplugging the Patriarchy, which really for me was... Here's
the book, you're allowed to hold it up.
Oh good,
Yes.
I'll just do a little advertisement, there it is, yeah. So the most significant seeing that we did, which really shifted everything for the women involved, because it's really about a collaboration of women who are very concerned about what's going on the planet and who have been trained from lifetime to lifetime as mystics and to do certain, you might say, an engineering job at the end of a cycle of time, right? So my teacher, Rama, he was my teacher in this and other lifetimes, he said, and I begin the book this way, at the end of a cycle of time, you know, Shiva, the god of death, the Hindu god of death, tap dances on our head. But at the end of a cycle, certain energetic configurations go away and other energetic configurations come into being. So the patriarchy is laid on a foundation of energetic structures. And the job of these three women was to go in and dismantle those structures. Now we're speaking on an energetic level, not a physical level, right? But we did look at the constructs that have to do with banking and media and industry and so on, the control of natural resources. It's all here, but we explore it not only in terms of the research about the physical, but we drill down into it in a mystical and psychic way. So it was really our job to take apart that configuration, and then it takes some time for those changes to filter down into the physical world. And I feel that that's what we're seeing now. We're seeing the unraveling in the physical, right, that started some time ago. Through our work was more, I mean, my point is through thousands of light workers' work, right? But we were trained to do a very specific job, which is sort of like a bomb squad, really. If you have a ticking time bomb in the patriarchy, then you don't send in the healers that day. You know, you send in mystics who are very cool-headed, and they know exactly which wires to snip, right? Yeah, and that's their job, and they do it, and then they're done. So, but to answer your question, if we go back to this very significant realization that we had, it was that women held the reins of power, and in order to understand that statement, you have to understand the difference between the configuration of the masculine and the feminine embodiment, yes? So masculine embodiment means you have a different physical body. You also have a different subtle physical body. Feminine subtle physical body is very different than the masculine subtle physical body. At the core, of course, we're all the same. Right? We're all the divine, right? There is no difference. There is no masculine and feminine from that way of perceiving it. But we live in a world of duality, and so we have to examine that. And so women intrinsically are oriented to these lower chakras. Everything is 180 degrees reversed in the patriarchy, right? And so the conditioning that a woman is given is that she is not powerful, that she is a second-class citizen, that she's overly emotional, right? She should know her place. But in essence, if you strip away all of that conditioning and you look at a woman's configuration, her spiritual configuration, her essence is power. She knows how to pull power up from silence, from the depths of the earth. She knows how to hold that in her body. She knows how to wield that through the navel chakra with the balance of the heart, right? A man is on a psychic and a spiritual level completely different. Of course, he's conditioned in a patriarchal society to believe he must always be strong, he must shut down the emotional body, he's the breadwinner, right? He's in control, he has the right to oppress, yeah? But in essence, if you strip all of that away and look at a man, he's very much focused on his heart.
Where does that come from? There will be a lot of people listening to you just now who followed you right up to that last moment. It's like, wait a minute, the focus of a man is on his heart if you strip away all the other stuff. Where does that come from, and how do we see that out there? Is this a reality anywhere? Well,
it's a psychic perception. I don't know that there's any way to quantify it or to intellectualize it, because psychic is a tool, right?
Sure.
So we have a mental body that's really just a logical tool. Of course, throughout the patriarchy, it's been told it's supposed to run the whole show and make all decisions.
Yes.
But really, it was created to be a logical tool, to make a grocery list or do your income tax or write a computer program. That's it, right? We have an emotional body that gets played like a harp, very valuable, but we also have a psychic body. So it's another way of apprehending knowledge, yeah? And so as a psychic, if someone has their third eye open and they can strip away the conditioning, just let all the conditioning fall, and they scan someone and look, what is the essence of this man sitting across from me, right? It's very obvious that it's his heart. And that's why most men, when they begin on a spiritual path, they study bhakti yoga, which is the yoga of the heart, of love and devotion. And then they graduate to studying jnana yoga, which is the yoga of discrimination, where you move beyond even love, even the highest vibration, into the clear light, right? That's a man's strength.
So why is it then that so many men are clanking around in battleship grade armor, such that the heart can either be seen or can communicate out? Why is it that this happens? Are you saying that this is all cultural conditioning?
Well, you could answer that question better than I
You want me
could.
to answer that question?
I assume it's all cultural
Wow.
conditioning.
Okay.
I haven't had many male incarnations.
Right. It's, yeah, I mean, it's a whole interesting topic. What it is to be a man in the 21st century is itself a whole study. And what I feel I can see, and I haven't studied this in the way that you have meditated on this extensively. But it's very clear to me that a lot of men nowadays, they don't know how to be. They've lost the rule book. They're confused. They don't know what's expected of them. They don't know how to be whatever it is to be truly masculine, because they're confused by Hollywood movies and archetypes and comic strips and a whole bunch of stuff that's been coming at them ever since they were kids. And they know that that's not right, but they don't know what is right. And in my experience, there are a lot of men who go around with as much of an act as they can get together to keep it together from day to day. Mm-hmm. And if you strip all that away, they're deeply confused. Mm-hmm. And at a risk, I would be saying that those deeply confused men are really hoping that they will encounter some woman who will be able to help them with this. And but here, this is such a complicated and convoluted and sometimes highly charged area that I think that many of those men don't find the high quality of woman who can understand all of this in the way that you can. Now, that's my off the top of the head response. What does that feel like to you?
It feels exactly right, and I think that the root of the problem for men is that they have been conditioned, as you say, from childhood to shut down the emotional body. So the whole idea of giving up that sort of prominent, dominant position in relationship is very threatening, and it brings up a lot of emotions, and then immediately the tendency is, this can't be, to stuff it, yeah? And in order to work through that process and come into an understanding, a deeper spiritual understanding of who one is as a man, one must be willing to be vulnerable enough to open up the emotional body.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so
that's hugely difficult.
Yeah.
Enormously difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, as we were discussing last night, I actually think that throwing off masculine conditioning is harder than for a woman throwing off female conditioning. It's the same for women. The package, you know, the pink package is very different than the blue package. Yeah. But so because women, you know, but you really have to look at it, don't you, in terms of oppressed and oppressor, if we're being honest. And I think we need to be in this discussion. So, and again, I don't say that with any judgment whatsoever, because I think we've gone through a learning. You know, this realization that we came to, yes, which we keep skirting, we keep getting sidetracked in these wonderful areas, but let me just say this because it may help to clarify, is that women who were wielding power, who held the reins of power at the end of the matrilinear era, they saw, it was a collective seeing, a deep collective spiritual understanding, that in order to rise from the second chakra, learning about birth and creativity, to the heart chakra, about balance, to come through this whole saga of learning about power, right? That the reins of power would have to be handed off to men. That men would need to be handed the reins in order to learn about power in all of its different aspects. And that involves the child putting its hand on the stove and taking it away, which is what is happening now, right?
That was my very next question, because there will be some people watching this who say, well, we don't see too many signs that this is all going to be over tomorrow. Of course, there are signs of great change in the world. People can feel this. There's a huge awakening of consciousness. You can ascribe all kinds of language to that. But we're still in the middle of that transition. It's not over yet at all, it seems to me. Well, I mean, you've got the militaries, and you've got government, and you've got the intelligence agencies, and the businesses, and I mean, they're all men, and they're all there, and they haven't quit their jobs yet, you know. And there's a lot of evidence that they want to hang on to it in a kind of, you know, I mean, they may be confused and they may be desperate, but they're hanging on, aren't they?
Yes, but we have to look at it from two different perspectives. In the physical world, what you say is true, right? On the inner world, right? Each of us have a choice. And one can take up residence in this new world of heart-based energy immediately. They can take up residence tomorrow. One could, if one made that deep inner decision to come into a place of balance, right? And if you come into that place of balance within yourself, which is really what, you know, I try to present that material in my book, because the book is actually not a book, it's a mystical experience which allows someone to touch on all of those energies, the patriarchal energies, and begin the process to whatever degree they're able and willing to unplug their energies from it. Yes? So if I have made an inner decision to unplug my energies from a patriarchal paradigm, then I am free to take up residence in the new world today. And it is like standing at the eye of the storm. Yes, all of this will come apart. It's destined to do so. And yes, it will be difficult on a physical level.
But you're saying basically that in the spiritual, metaphysical world, this tipping point has already really taken place, and it's going to be a little while before it percolates down into the physical.
Yes,
this is what you're
into the third dimension, which we're calling the physical, yes? So this is really the fourth chakra, what you could call the fourth dimension. So this new paradigm in consciousness has its foundation on the fourth level of consciousness, which vibrates in a much higher way than the physical third dimensional world. And that's just the foundation. It's multidimensional from there, So I'm saying if you move into the fourth dimension, then third dimension, it's going to fall apart, but it really doesn't affect you.
Yes, sure. I understand what you mean, actually. I guess between us we need to do as much of an interpretation job to people who haven't followed your work so far. Certainly there are massive changes taking place in the invisible world, in the spiritual world. Once again, we're talking problems of language, where there are huge changes and shifts that have taken place in recent years. And of course it all takes a little bit of time to percolate down and manifest, as the words which I use. Let me put you on the spot with a couple of questions then. Just in real terms, how long do you feel it would be before the world, in structural terms, in terms of power and who's got the power, really starts to look different? And what might it look like then? Can you take a sneak peek into the future and describe it?
I think it's very difficult to do that, because everything is so churned up. Everything is so much in a state of upheaval that it's almost impossible. And there are so many different alternate futures that can play out. Really, it's in our hands in terms of consciousness. We can ratchet things up as far as we want in terms of consciousness. That's a decision that's being made on a collective level, right? So, but I can tell you, I have a very definitive seeing in terms of the energetic manifestation of it, and that is that, you know, we're in a period of time now. We're at March in 2011, right? And sometime near the end of this year, the energies will begin to lock into place. And I feel that they're going to completely lock into place. And I'm going back to those structures. Remember, we said certain energetic structures go away at the end of a cycle and others come into being. So the structures that are coming into being are still morphing and changing and evolving and ascending, but they will lock into place sometime near the end of 2012. Now, how long will it take the third dimensional world to reflect that? We don't know. It could be 5 years, it could be 20 years. I have no sense. But only then will we be able, once the patriarchy and those energies completely resolve themselves and fall apart, only then, I feel, will we be able to begin recycling the aspects of the patriarchy and literally in the third dimension building a new world.
That's a lovely vision. So why did you call the book Unplugging the Patriarchy? Is it because, like this metaphor of unplugging a power cord, so it's no longer empowered by everyone else who's kind of giving their consent in a tacit kind of way? You're saying that we withdraw our consent from this structure here.
Exactly.
Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Because my feeling is, the patriarchy only exists because we allow it to exist.
Yes.
The patriarchy's here.
Yes.
We're brought into the patriarchy. Understandably, we've been conditioned to be a part of the patriarchy.
It's an abusive relationship.
Yes.
It's a codependent
exactly.
It's a codependent relationship.
Oh,
exactly.
I love that. It's a codependent relationship.
I mean, you have this situation, you have this classic situation with an abusive patriarchal man, and a woman who's hoping every day that it's going to change tomorrow, and she's unable to walk down the street and saying, you know what, no more. She can't do that.
Yes.
She's kind of hanging on in there, hoping, and is being a victim of all of this, and isn't claiming her power back in the way that she could.
Yes.
And this has been going on a global level.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. If you stopped anyone, even a Wall Street, analyst today on the street, and you said, "Is the system broken? Does it need to change?" The answer would be yes. But then there's always this implied, hesitation in the answer that says, as long as it doesn't affect me, as long as my stock portfolio doesn't go down, as long as I can still put food on the table for my children and pay my mortgage, right?
Yes.
These are the important things. Well, I'm sorry. Things are in a state of upheaval, and that may or may not be the case. And the energy of the heart, would not be concerned about those things. It would say, all right, give me the experience in the next 2 years that's going to be the most evolutionary for my soul. If that means losing my house, or that means I have a difficult time with finance, perhaps that's the experience my soul needs to go through. And I'll accept that with grace and learn from that, yes?
That's tough for some people to hear, though, isn't it?
Oh, of course it is. Of course it is. We're like our creature comforts, don't we?
Well, yeah. But your book has been seized on and admired and focused on, and has catalyzed a lot of debate and discussion. It seems to be the right thing at the right time. Some people have even said it's the kind of book that they were waiting for, right? What was it that inspired you to write it at this time?
Oh, I didn't write it. I was forced to write it. And it was really Spirit that wrote it. It was really the Divine Mother, I have to be honest, who wrote the book, right? It's the Divine Mother speaking through this embodiment, this trained mystic, right? And so if it had been up to me, I would have written it in a year and had it out on the market, but it would have been premature.
Okay.
And so every deadline I set, was not met. And it ended up coming out at exactly the right time. Before that, it would have been speculation. It would have been conspiracy theory. Now people are ready. It's a very systematic analysis of how, the energies of 5,000 years, how this whole contorted thing came into being, how all of the energies were inverted and bastardized and corrupted and polarized, right? People are now looking, for an explanation as to how that happened, and how do I begin to break free of that here within myself.
Yes.
Right, because consciousness is accelerating, it's ascending, and so there is a level of awareness that's ready, I think, more to take responsibility for the patriarchy here and to begin to dismantle it here, knowing that if all of us simply, stand up from the patriarchal monopoly board and stop playing, the game ends. That's it.
That's another beautiful, visual metaphor, the monopoly board. Yeah. Okay, now, So, my confession is that I have not read this book. Okay. It was thrust into my hands with great enthusiasm by one of my closest friends, saying, listen, you've got to read this book, and I will. And I've heard that reading the book is not just a book, actually it's a personal journey that people go through from the first to the last page. And I've heard quite a bit about that, and that's really captured my attention, because I'm intrigued by this. But from what you have been told, what do women get from reading the book, and what do men get from reading the book? What happens to them?
I don't know if I can speak to that from men reading the book. Occasionally I get feedback, an email of a man who has read the book. But the book was really written it's about women. It was written by a woman. It was written for women. It was written to model women reclaiming and standing in their power, because the women in the book do that, right? And in my estimation, that's the first wave of this transition. Women are on the front lines now of consciousness. Until women reclaim their power, throw off their conditioning of being second-class citizens and really move out onto the front lines, men won't have a chance to react to that and to open up the emotional body and to process their reaction to, you know, the second-class citizen. You know, now we're coming into equality. So always, if we go back to that situation of oppression, the oppressed must throw off the yoke and say, no more, no more, I'm going to stand. I don't have to oppose you, I don't have to judge you, but if I stand, right? If I simply stand as you stand in martial arts, in a ready position. So I'm not throwing a punch at you. If I do that, I'm off balance. And I'm not blocking. I'm also off balance if I block. But if I simply stand and I meet your energy with exactly the right amount of energy that you are projecting at me, right? To counter it, right? It's very Gandhi-esque, what I'm proposing. That women simply stand, right? And allow men to react, allow men to then process what they need to process in order to reclaim their heart and come into a more humble state of mind where they're ready, willing, and able to come to the table and accept women as equals and to co-create an egalitarian society, because we have different gifts. We have different skill sets. Everyone is needed. There's no right and wrong here. We've all bought into this out of balance system. But really it's women who must take the first move and be strong enough to allow men to then react against that.
So if this book is a manual for to assist and support women in doing that, do the men need one as well? Or do they just freak out and throw a tantrum for a few years with the women just standing there, and eventually they get to the other side of it and then look in the mirror and find out who they are?
Well, the other point of the book is to allow someone to read it and, as I said, touch on all of these different aspects, energetic aspects of the patriarchy, and to begin to unplug themselves from it. So that is applicable for a man reading the book as well as a woman. There's no difference really. But I think a man has to have the humility to approach a book that's written about women doing something that's incredibly powerful, outrageous in the terms of the patriarchal society in which we live, right? Of women coming together and dismantling the patriarchy. How dare you? It's sort of like that moment in that wonderful moment in The Lord of the Rings, you know, where Frodo and Sam and Gollum, they're at the back door of Mordor. You remember this moment? And Gollum tells them, this gate isn't guarded because they don't expect anyone to come in here. And they don't expect hobbits to be doing this job. These are little insignificant beings, right? But really they're the ones with the strength and the tenacity, and the ones who are balanced enough to be able to carry the ring and not be seduced by its power, you see? Wielding power in a balanced way. So it's a beautiful likeness, the two. And so the patriarchy simply, I don't think, was expecting, you know, women They didn't realize that was their major problem, if you want to look at it in terms of duality. Yeah. So they didn't realize they would slip in through the back door and accomplish this.
I like that visual metaphor as well. But right now in the world, looking out on the real world through your television set or your computer or the movies or the media or whatever, do you see real signs that there are more and more men who, if they were here, part of this conversation, they would say, you know what, I completely understand and agree and support what you're saying?
Yes.
You see more of this happening?
Yes, it's a really important question. And I have felt a huge shift this year. I'm really happy you're bringing this up, because there is an openness that I am feeling that is coming into my attention field from the masculine that's so welcome and so beautiful. I know I get emails from women who've attended my workshops, and they say, you know, they take the DVD of the workshop home and their husband or their partner says, oh, I want to watch it. And it actually goes in. It's all about women and female conditioning. But it goes in because it begins to lay a foundation for answering what some of these really basic issues are. Answering the question of why are we so out of balance? And if a man can understand what it has felt like for a woman for 5,000 years to be repressed, and then if she didn't get that she was supposed to be chattel, being burned at the stake, if he can really start to tap into that energy and understand his part of having been part of the perpetration of that, again, without judgment. It was all simply a learning, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, I've remembered lifetimes where I put these structures in place, and the realization of how would I know how to take them apart if I hadn't done the dance with the dark forces and helped to put the patriarchal structures in place that limited consciousness for humanity. That was huge for me. But until I see that, I can't balance this within myself, you see?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. What comes up for me there is what was put in place in South Africa at the end of apartheid. They had the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which wasn't about punishment. It wasn't about blame, and it wasn't about witch hunts. It was just about saying, okay, we have to acknowledge what happened here so we can move on. You know, this is what I did. You know, now I've got this off my chest. And sometimes these things were pretty huge and pretty horrific.
Yes.
And it was a flawed process to some degree, but it was probably a more enlightened process than we've seen in that kind of situation ever.
Exactly.
But you're kind of almost envisaging something like this. It's where, in some way, men or that collective body of men, whatever they are, they sort of say, in some form, they say, you know what, this is what we've done, this really is the way that it is, and maybe at some point there will be some enlightened men who may write books to be a counterpart of yours from their point of view, you know, like this huge kind of apology or something, or an acknowledgement of their role in this group learning. Do you think that's possible?
Oh God, I hope so.
Yeah.
I do think that was it was like a petri dish in South Africa, what happened with apartheid. In fact, that's where my book starts.
Really?
Yes, because I go to South Africa and I look into apartheid when I'm there as a mystic, and I ask to understand at a deep level what that energy was like, because I know it's a microcosm for the entire patriarchy. And that was the first moment for me that I really went into the energy of the patriarchy with all of its violence and oppression and you know, all of the out of balance energies really merged with it and became the patriarchy. That's what started me on my journey. And so this Truth and Reconciliation experience that they went through, it was beautiful, because really the only payment for the perpetrators there in apartheid was simply that they come clean, not only in public but here within themselves. So if there was an emotional and a psychic and a spiritual breakthrough for them, right? If they could say, yes, I did this. Yes, I tortured black people and I killed people in prison here. as part of this regime, right? If there could be a reckoning here and a softening, that's what they were looking for. They were looking, those tribunals happened, and there was a psychic reading taken. Did this person really drop into balance? Yes. Then forgiveness. Yes? If the person couldn't get there, then I'm sorry, you have to pay the penalty. And that's as it should be. I think that's what's happening on the planet now. We're at a stage when darkness is no longer acceptable on this planet. And darkness is being given its agenda. I mean, its ultimatum. It's not, we're not at a bargaining table here, right? I know people who are doing brilliant work in this area. And because we took apart the structures, our part was engineering. Other people work with the actual beings who are holding the embodiment of darkness here. And so you go to this being and you say, your time is up. And I'm going to focus light on you, and you have no choice. So you can either drop the body and leave, you can change, as they did in the Truth and Reconciliation movement. We're happy. We're happy to embrace you with light and bring you into the fold if you want to play nice in the game. But if you don't want to play nice, I'm sorry, time's up.
I know exactly what you're talking about. I've done some of that work myself. It's happening all over the world. And we may never know our teammates in this huge endeavor here, because there are a lot of, I mean, there's so much work that's been happening over the last 10, 20 years. One thing I'd like to touch on here, it's this violence and oppression and compulsive control that we've been talking about, that are characteristics of what you call the patriarchy. Women are not the only victims. Look at the slave trade. Look at the Holocaust. Look at all kinds of genocide. Look at colonialism. Look at the way that the British went into Africa and shot every lion they could find just because they could. Just because they could. And now we look back on those times and we think, my God, why did they do all this? It was just a sort of psychotic compulsion. The way that little boys pull the legs off spiders. I don't know if little girls do that, but little boys apparently do. But that aggression or that desire for control or that kind of bullying on this enormous scale wasn't discriminating in its targets, was it? I mean, it wasn't just women. It's just men trashing the entire planet and every culture they could lay their hands on. Look at the conquistadors, look at the Incas, look at what happened to the Native Americans. You know, I mean, men have got a lot to answer for, and not all of it is about women.
Well, I think what you're speaking about is really, it's not just power, but obsession with power. So in mysticism, again, if you go back, because it's the study of power, and I've trained as a mystic for many lifetimes, and so this abuse of power, that's the catalyst for abuse of power, is obsession with power, you see? And when you become obsessed with power, you're like a horse with blinders on, right? So you really don't see life accurately. You just have this need to put, it's the rush, you know, it's like an addict. It's really a drug, power. And so there's this need to pull power in, you know, this idea, you know, who was it, Adam Weishaupt, you know, in Germany, the head of the Illuminati, right? And he said, to control even the best of men, not just the ordinary men, but to know that, to know that I could control even the best of men. You know? So that's this obsession, this rush that comes with knowing I could be king of the world, right? And that completely cuts off the heart chakra. Sure. There's a real cycle of abuse here, isn't there? I remember, for instance, many years ago, I was working with a guy, because I used to be a management consultant and stuff. I used to do a lot of leadership and executive training. Used to work with a lot of men, of course. Men who are struggling with their own power position as leaders of organizations and so on. I remember talking to one guy who was just driven
to do everything that he possibly could do. And of course, with somebody who's compulsively driven, they never get to a point when they're satisfied. You always need to have more. And I got to the point, I finally got to the point when I could ask the question, well, what is it that's powering this relentless motivation to you to make it to the very, very top? And he was silent for a while, and he said, I'm trying to prove to my father that I'm not a failure. And then I asked him, well, what does your father say about this? His father died 20 years ago, and he's still trying to prove to this ghostly concept that's hovering in time, this judgmental father, who himself is a patriarch who's judging his son. And then you get this cycle of abuse, that the son somehow feels that he's got to live up to his father's expectations. And the thing never ends, and it's like, how do you break those cycles?
But that's male conditioning you've just described.
Absolutely.
An aspect of male conditioning.
Yeah.
Which is, my self-worth is based on how successful I am, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And behind that there's the fear. Because behind that is the fear that maybe his father was right. Maybe he was a no good, lazy, whatever. And so if anyone has to prove something, behind it is always the fear that maybe they can't.
Yes, and that's the fear of balance. And so then if we want to take that equation and look at it in terms of what's happening today, it really could be tracked back to fear of the feminine.
Exactly.
Hatred of the misogyny, right? Yeah.
Yes. A lot of men, now here again I'm laying myself wide open to mass castigation here, but I think a lot of men, I mean, it would be an overstatement to say they're frightened of women, but that kind of man that I was trying to describe earlier, who's actually confused, who doesn't know exactly who he is, how he's meant to be in society, how he's meant to be as a father, or as a husband, or as a partner, or as a citizen. He doesn't really know what's expected of him anymore. Is he meant to be macho? Is he meant to buy roses every day? What's he meant to do? Is he meant to be the breadwinner? Is he meant to be tough? Is he meant, men don't have a manual for this. And then sometimes, in certain circumstances, certainly that man is actually really quite frightened of a woman who seems to be more balanced than he is, and who might be able to offer him advice, or to support him, or to correct him, or to point things out to him that he doesn't know. These are all very hard for the male ego to take. And of course that's a bridge into the next part of this conversation, which is this archetypal construct, which is the male ego. This is a word that you haven't used yet. Where does that fit into things? Is it different from the female ego? Is the male ego wrapped up in this whole construct that you've been describing? Is this the source of the problem?
Well, ego, the egoic structure, we all have an egoic structure, we share that in common, but it's just that the conditioning is very, very different in the pink package and the blue package, right? So, as you were talking, what I was thinking about was really the fear of the feminine. It's not so much external, it expresses itself that way, but it's the fear of the feminine here. If it's a male embodiment, then it's the fear of the feminine here. And all the male during the patriarchy has heard about the feminine is that it's weaker. It is the weaker sex. It's a second-class citizen, right? So obviously that's going to set up, that's going to have a charge on it. So at some point for myself, in working through my own masculine and female conditioning, I had to drop those terms because they have such a charge on it, because the conditioning around it in the patriarchy is 180 degrees flipped, yes? And I started to use the words solar and lunar. It made much more sense to me So I was actually programmed in a very solar way. I was I was an only child and my father's only son, and he gave me a very masculine or solar type of orientation to the world. And so as a woman, I had to be willing to drop back and reclaim my lunar side, which most people would think of as, you know, let's just define. Solar is the outgoing principle, the yang principle, so the active, the passionate, the creative, right? And the lunar would be the yin quality, so the receptive, the nurturing, the more quiet, the more humble, yes? So what I find in speaking with men is that if you say to a man you need to reclaim your feminine side, that immediately sets up a trigger, because why would I want to be weaker? Why would I want to reclaim my second-class citizenship? No way. But if you say to a man, cultivate your lunar aspect, then that's almost acceptable and doable, yes?
Yes.
Yeah, maybe we don't know how to do it yet, but it really doesn't have that charge on it. I need to learn to be more receptive. I could stand to learn to be more nurturing, right? I could be supportive of the female solar. Oh, so how does that feel? Now that feels more in balance, yes? Yeah.
Yes. As we move through this transition, do you see it as a pendulum swing back towards a kind of, I guess, a kind of matriarchy? Or do you really see the pendulum just returning to the middle and then stopping? Because then we've got a balance. And then you've got a whole new world.
Yes, to the center. It's egalitarian. Although I have to say that I think women are better equipped in most cases to lead. You know, and here we have to be careful, because if we view that in terms of duality, then that has a charge on it, doesn't it? If we assume that a leader is better than someone who is implementing something suggested by the leader or being facilitated by the leader, really to lead is to serve.
Of course.
Yes, I mean to rule is to serve. That used to be, you know, the definition of royalty, and we've come just the opposite. Again, 180 degrees to a feudal system. To rule is to be served.
Yes.
Yeah. So really, to lead is to create a situation where you're holding an energetic configuration in which everyone feels like they are equal and they have something to offer.
And they feel empowered.
And they feel empowered, of course. And so the true leader is someone who you wouldn't even think of as a leader. You wouldn't even acknowledge necessarily as a leader. You know, it can be done in a very sneaky sort of way, so that it's empowering the whole. But women, I think, are intrinsically, as I said, more capable of wielding power in a balanced way. So, you know, I have this diagram, it's on my website, and really unplugging the patriarchy is about the masculine energies, the way the masculine energies throughout the patriarchy have outplayed. So the book, on a very subtle level, is about the diamond body configuration in Tibetan Buddhism. Are you familiar with this?
No, I'm not.
But the diagram is really a sort of star map. And a star map has to be flattened down into 3 dimensions, right? So you really have to stand back from this star map and allow it to rise up. And when the triangles in the center of that diagram rise up, there are 2 pyramids with their bases together. And 2 pyramids with their base together creates the diamond body of primordial light. It's the last energetic body of light that the spiritual aspirant has before you actually break through into the void. Yes? So if you take those energies, that diamond body energy, and you pull it apart, if you pull those pyramids apart and you flip them around and you invert them, then you've got a patriarchal structure. And it's all laid out very systematically in the book. There's an analysis of it. But really the feminine, you know, there are 12 feminine archetypes that are around that structure. So the masculine is there, it's brilliant at holding structure. at taking ideas and implementing them and structuring things and holding those energies in a kind of balanced way, yes? But the feminine is chaotic. The feminine all around the outside, it expresses itself in these beautiful different energies, but really it spins. Mm-hmm. And that's why, you know, the masculine thinks of the feminine as being chaotic, but not looking more deeply into it to realize that really intrinsic in chaos is divine chaos. Mm. There is an order in chaos. It may not seem apparent at the onset when we're spinning, but it does release into divine order eventually. And so the feminine is on the outside. It's more fiery. It spins. The whole thing spins. It actually spins into the 12 fully activated strands of DNA with the diamond body in the center. That's the full-blown picture of where we're going on an energetic level. So it's like we have this earth with her diamond body and the spiral of the 12 fully activated strands of DNA, right, on a string, a pearl on a string, going out into the universe. That's the evolution of the earth. And then we can go down into one cell and we can say, what's happening there? Diamond body, 12 fully activated strands of DNA. Yeah? Same.
In the world now, what I see, and I'm sure what you see, is you see many women who are aspiring to power or aspiring to leadership, but the only formula that they have is to copy men, right? Do you see any examples in public life of women who are truly bringing what I believe you would call the divine feminine into their responsible role? They're not just being a clone of a man like Margaret Thatcher or somebody like that.
You're saying in public life?
Yes.
So we have an example or an illustration to hold out?
In what you could call high-profile leadership positions that are that have been traditionally occupied by the patriarchy. I'm just looking for signs of, you know, like, this woman, she's doing it. She's like ahead of the pack here, and it's an example for others. Well,
we see it a lot, I think, behind closed doors in spiritual communities that are led by women.
Yes.
But that's not public. And so when we begin to see it expressed in the public, we tend to see it more in bits and pieces. So sometimes what I refer to is, if you look at Mother Teresa, Mother Teresa was really a magician. She was really a mystic, and she operated from the third chakra. She was extraordinarily powerful in what she accomplished, but she played within the context of the patriarchal church, right?
Yes.
The Catholic Church. So she played their game, but they really couldn't stop her. They canonized her after her death, didn't they, as a saint?
Yes.
Yeah, and it was because she really did her own thing, and she went out and healed the sick and was extraordinarily powerful in doing so. Or if you look at Princess Diana, I think one of the reasons she was taken out was that she really was approaching, you know, unplugging from the patriarchal system. She was pure heart chakra. So she would go into AIDS wards, or she would go to South Africa, or she would go to a place where there were landmines. And she would talk to the people, and when you saw her talking and dealing with people, it was absolutely genuine, wasn't it? I mean, Hillary Clinton also goes into AIDS wards, but if you hold those two up and you look at the difference, yes, Hillary Clinton's not coming from her heart. Heart chakra is completely...
She's doing it because it's the right thing for a politician to do.
Exactly, and the heart chakra is completely closed down. So we have Princess Diana, who was beginning to pull away more and more into that heart chakra based energy and pulling an entire nation with her. I mean, look at what happened when she was killed. You know, look at the flowers, the volume of flowers, look at the outpouring. And those two women died at the same time, interestingly enough, within a week of each other. So there were two incredible archetypes, female archetypes that were taken down at the same time. Interesting.
Yes. Do you see, would you anticipate that there will be many more that will rise into the public view in the next 5, 10, 15 years?
Oh, Absolutely.
This is inevitable, right?
It's inevitable.
Yes.
And it's happening now. I think, perhaps we shouldn't look for them at a global level, but rather at a local level, because things are becoming, we're returning to localization, aren't we? It's going to become necessary to return to community and localization. This whole system of globalization that's fueled on petroleum is going away. It's going to collapse. We can no longer ship pineapples from, across the world here soon.
Well, yes, I mean, it's the kind of, as we're talking, the patriarchy in its sort of last cornered stand is sort of, may well be plotting all kinds of things to secure the iron fist on their control of the world. And there are a lot of people who are really quite worried that they may succeed in that, simply because there's a sense of desperation that the control is slipping, and therefore they have to grab it now, and they may do it in an especially violent way. I have to say on record here that I don't think that will work at all. I actually feel very confident that it won't work, but times for the next 2 or 3 years could be really quite turbulent, as within this patriarchy you get last stands being made by particularly extreme representatives of the patriarchy who just will not step down. Do you see that as well, or do you think I'm being too pessimistic about that?
No, I think the patriarchy is in its death throes, and when something is dying, it flails around, doesn't it? Yeah, but I do think that we've reached a point. I think we reached it sometime last summer, when, or even earlier, when light really dominated on the planet, and it's doing more so every day. But consciousness has a way of working in a kind of 11th hour way,
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be surprised if we run it right up to the edge of the cliff. But it's okay, let them flail away. I mean, that would only indicate to me that humanity needs that type of intensified experience in order to catapult them into this energy of the heart. Because you see, we're either going to play it out in the physical world, or we're going to play it out in terms of consciousness, or we're going to play it out as a combination of both. Right? So it's going to be a combination of both, and light dominates at this point, and darkness is being given its ultimatum, no question about this. I think most of those of us who can see feel that.
Yes.
But if we need to have one last hurrah, so that humanity really can, I mean, that's what's happening in the Middle East. People are basically saying enough is enough, and humanity needs to say
and that feels
enough is enough. Yeah,
that feels very real, doesn't it? Does it feel real to you? I mean, it's not the kind of CIA orchestrated stuff. These are the globalists were taken by surprise by this. These are real people in the streets. I
think yes and no. I think the people who are out on the streets protesting may not actually know what they are protesting against. They may think it is my government here. It's who's sitting in power in Egypt, really. But it's beyond that, isn't it, as we know, because you've been in the business of pulling the curtain aside for a long time.
Yes.
But it really doesn't matter. When you bring a person to their knees, when they're no longer able to work and feel self-worth and put food on the table for themselves and their children, people become desperate. And that's a happy thing. That's a point we need to reach.
Yes.
Do we need to reach it in the physical? Hopefully not. But we need to reach it here, where we finally stand up and say, that's it. I've had enough. I stand up from the monopoly game of the patriarchy. Yeah? And that's what I mean by becoming more local. Yes. Then people are going to realize I have to start looking to my local community, have to start growing my food, I have to really start working, get out in front of my television and start working with some other people here to make this happen on a smaller scale, because really the microcosm is the macrocosm, yeah?
Yes.
We've been saying, what is it? Think globally, act locally.
Yes.
Yes, and we can also think locally, act globally. It's all the same.
Yes.
Yeah.
And for you personally, what happens next? How do you follow this? You must be receiving invitations to talk and give courses, and people asking you questions, and people wanting you to travel and say more and explain things. This is really kind of started like a huge wave of a new phase of your own life. Yes?
Yes, I suppose so. It does go in waves, and I have to be willing to let those waves come through. And so often what that means for us in our physical life is completely dropping not only the physical construct, through which we operate, our business format, but also our outpicturing of how it should look, right? And so I think it is one of those times for me when something entirely new is coming through. I really think that this year is the year of no nonsense. It's the year to be truthful. We've been nice, and we've talked around things, and we've been polite and skirted the issues for a long time. I don't think we can afford to do that anymore. So I can feel in myself really this kind of new energy coming, which is just standing up and saying, okay, this is the way it is. I don't care if you don't like it. I don't care if you want to react. It's good if you react. You need to react, right? So because reaction is the first part of then taking responsibility, yes? So fine, have your reaction. But I think all of us are coming into a place where truth is very important.
Well, yes. Because we haven't got an enormous amount of time to get this right. This is the other thing. It certainly seems clear to me and a lot of the people I've been talking with that we're up against a bit of a ticking clock here. Yeah. What is your perception of the ticking clock? What's really at stake here? Is it possible that we could get this wrong? Is there an uncertain outcome there, even though it looks... No, you feel totally confident.
I feel totally confident. Okay. It's already done. It's already done. The only thing that's unclear, if we come back to that foundation of energies that we're laying, that are going to lock down at the end of 2012, right? That's done. We could lock it down now and be fine. Often you'll read people who channel the Galactic Federation or whomever, and they're always very much in awe of what's happened on the planet. You've exceeded our wildest expectations. And I think that's true. I think we're just fine. But we have this incredible portal, this incredible opportunity that faces us right now, which is we can ratchet up this ascension process as high as we want. The sky is the limit. So I often am fond of saying, we can go from point A to point B, or we can go to point C, or we can go to point F, or we could go to point M if we wanted to, right? It just depends upon how many people in the collective are willing to drop the nonsense, take responsibility, recognize that the patriarchy that's coming unraveled is here, saying, I understand. We're at the end of a cycle. This has been a teaching. I see. I embody my teaching now. I step back from this into this other dimension in consciousness. Fine. Play your games in the patriarchy as long as you need. But if you're standing as one pillar of light on the planet and you are networking with other pillars of light, right? This is already happening. This one heart, one mind. It is becoming more and more intensified. That light is becoming more and more brilliant, right? This is what we have the ability to ratchet up. It's just that. It's magical. It's happening in terms of consciousness. Has nothing to do with the intellect understanding it. Intellect can't understand it. Intellect is passé at this point. Can't possibly keep up. We've entered into the realm of alchemy, right? And we can do anything. We just have to come into a point where we can recognize that we can do anything as the collective.
That's a wonderful, inspirational, final, closing sort of presentation to anyone. Yes, I absolutely love it. Is there anything else that you would like to state on this platform that we have now? This will be seen by tens of thousands of people who will be scratching their heads and then saying to their spouses, whichever way, you know what, I think you should really listen to this. What else would you like to present?
I just think it's important to listen to your heart. You know, if you've listened to this information and it seems outrageous, it is outrageous. In terms of the patriarchy, it's really outrageous. But sometimes you just have to hold things up and feel them rather than try to understand them, don't you? And so you hold up the patriarchy and you hold up this information and you say, how does this resonate? Is this woman trying to manipulate me? Is she trying to sell me something, right? You have to hold up the vibration. And you say, now how does that feel inside of me? Does that resonate inside of me, right? And it's for each of us to decide. I think each of us is so powerful. Each of us has done so much work. Each of us is capable of so much more than we give ourselves credit for. And it really, even though we talk in global terms, it comes back to this. You want to make a change in the world? Change this. Very simple. Sit down and meditate every morning. Come back to the still point, yeah? Right? Give up your judgments. Work through your judgments. I mean, my body of work is really going into a whole way of doing that, which is to embrace everything, to embrace the energies of the patriarchy, right? To meet them, to acknowledge them, to see them, honor them, embrace them, merge with them. Anything that's really seen and honored comes to rest. And so if we're willing to turn and do that with all of the energies here, all of the judgments here, all of the discomforts here, right? Then we bring this to rest. Then we can stand more and more as a pinnacle of light. Then we contribute more and more light on the planet. So that's what's in the court of each of your viewers, yeah?
That's a wonderful inspiration as well, absolutely. It would be very, very interesting, wouldn't it, to revisit this conversation in a year's time and then take a rain check and see how things are moving. And I imagine that you would anticipate that things are moving fast. They're accelerating, right? Yes, everywhere.
Very much so. It's interesting that we have our conversation one day after the Mayan calendar. We were saying the 9th wave of the Mayan calendar began on the 9th of March, you know, which is the final wave, really, of everything spiraling up. We cycle through everything very, very fast now. And so the whole thing is the more you're holding on, the more difficult this year is going to be, right? The more you can let go and reconcile the energies here and say, okay, I'm going to take whatever lessons you give me. I surrender to that learning. Then you're riding the wave. I wrote a newsletter recently, surfing the tsunami. That's where we're at. We've got the tsunami coming in. And the trick of it is, if your boat is overloaded with people and baggage, and you're going to capsize.
Yes.
So better to get a surfboard and just surf it. Yeah, because eventually we're going to be dolphins just playing in the wave, completely merged into formlessness. We are the ascension. Yes.
That's a beautiful summary. Thank you so much. I can't possibly top that. Bless you for your work.
Thank you.
For men and for women all over the world. Thank you.
Oh, you make me cry.